Hey everyone, Steve here from PC Budget Solutions, and I got something for you today. Well, technically I did most of this yesterday, but I digress. So I just did a roughly $1,000 RGB gaming computer. I just did a live build log, did a live stream of it a couple days ago. There are a couple audio issues and all fun jazz, but overall it is done in ops, so you can take a look at that. But today we're going to do a quick unboxing and a full review, and when I mean full review, I mean thermals of the Cooler Master LC120E RGB. So normally I go with the ML120L, Master Liquid Light 120, but they're out of stock. This one's RGB. It comes with an RGB fan that I feel is kind of questionable, but take a look at the results, because I've been wrong once in my life. Twice is, I guess, not out of the question. So let's take a look. Let's see what's in this. Then we'll take a look at the performance, and then we'll go ahead and just wrap everything up. So here we go. Let's get an opener up here. I feel like this might be an older model. I'm not entirely sure, but let's take a look. So we have a fan that's, and this is the only reason why I bought it. This is not a static pressure fan. So first of all, the fan blades are really, we're going to do a comparison. We're going to try this versus the other fans that I'm using. I'm pretty confident that these aren't going to be especially great. You have warranty information. You have installation instructions. You have a 120 millimeter AIO. So very simple. It looks like this has very similar design as the ML240L, so the mounting should be the same. Block's fine. It does have an RGB header, so this is going to be a $1,000 RGB gaming computer is what this is going to be. So a lot of hardware, so let's take a look at the hardware. So this is cool. This is something I do like, and that is this has essentially a 3-to-1. So what's cool is I believe the case supports this as well. So with this particular adapter and what comes with the case and the fans, we should have plenty of RGB connectors and such. Then we have, I have no idea what this is, but it's some sort of power unit, not entirely sure. And then we have all the mounting that you'll probably need. So I'm going to take a couple guesses here. So this is most likely just for Intel, which is fine. Let me look at, yes, so this is interesting. So this is something I do like, is this is actually using the stock AM4, AM3, etc. mounting. So how this looks to me is this has 3 screws that go in each, and this will mount. Here, let's do it. Let's see how difficult this is here. So I don't have a motherboard to show you guys on. It does include thermal paste, so it's not pre-applied. I like that move. It allows them to be lazy, but also deliver, I think, a better overall product. And Cooler Master's thermal paste is fine. I don't have any issues with it. So I do want to take a look at the installation guide for one reason. I'll explain in a second here. For AMD, I'm curious about something. Let me read. Is this? Here we go. Okay, so let me quickly read here. Just 2 screws, really? Interesting. I would have felt you wanted 4. It's saying basically 1 screw in the center, so this is what it's calling for. So essentially, let me logistically look at this here. So this is going to go here. That's going to go on the bottom. So let's first thread this to make sure I have the right screws, which I may or may not. I don't know yet. So, in the Intel, well, this is essentially the Intel bag, right? There's two of these really small screws. They're labeled as L. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. That's what you need. The 4 screws that came in the AMD bag, essentially, are actually to mount the radiator to the case. So what we'll do now is we're going to go ahead and follow the instructions here. Let's just kind of... I had it wrong originally anyway, so it's a moot point. Let's go ahead and get this lined up here. There we go. So it actually slots in right here. So it doesn't go on the bottom like the previous ones I believe did. Which is good because it gives you a feeling like you know where it goes. So that makes sense on why that goes where it does. So let's go ahead and slot this one in over here. Get it lined up. Doesn't seem to be much turning on it. So the one thing I do like about Cooler Master, so they include a fair bit. So they include the adapter, which is really cool. And then if you're dealing with female plugs, it gives you a double-sided, like RGB piece, essentially gives you 4 of those. So this was $50 plus tax shipped to my door. So definitely really happy with everything that came with it. I'm curious about the performance because this is a slightly different version of what we've seen in the past. Now, one thing I do like is they include 2 different kind of through pieces. They have your standard ones. Oh no, that's actually for someone else, my apologies. They only have 1 kind, and that's fine because these work perfectly fine because what's cool about them, so like I said, I'm not gonna be using this fan, but what's really nice is literally they have a nice little headpiece to them, so it's very easy. You can get all 4 of them started, and then you can take a screwdriver if need be and get it the rest of the way down. So that's one thing I really like about Cooler Master AIOs. They're not industry leading. I mean, you know, their Master Light series is definitely okay for entry and mid-range. I wouldn't go, like my 2700X, it didn't keep up. It was running 80 degrees, and that was not preferred. So I decided that I'm gonna do a full review here. As I mentioned in the intro, I shot the intro much later than the actual unboxing here. So let's take a look at the test bench. We're running an AMD Ryzen 5 2600. We're using a Cooler Master LC120E. Stacked it on top of an Asus X470 Pro motherboard. 16 gigabyte of crucial DDR4 3000 megahertz, running at 3000 megahertz. The Deep Cool Matrix case, we're using 2 of the RF120 RGB fans as intake, and this is being placed in the exhaust. EVGA 500 BQ, it's 80 plus bronze, and XFX RX 580 GTS 8 gig GDDR5, and an ADATA for 80 gig SSD boot drive. Now, let's take a look at the conditions so you know how exactly I tested this. So let's take a look at the testing conditions. Now, a couple assumptions need to be made. All temperatures were corrected to 20 degrees ambient temperature. I measured the temperature at the time of the test at the front of the case. All fans were connected to a fan hub, and it was run off of turbo speed based on PWM CPU temperature, and that includes the actual fan that's on the AIO core as well as the 2 front fans. The AIO itself was plugged into the AIO pump. IDA64 was tested with both CPU and GPU load as well as memory load as well. The package temperature was measured. Sustained temperature was mainly assessed. It's based off of basically the flat lines. I took a look at some of the flat lines and see where they fell at. Memory was overclocked on all tests at 3000 megahertz, 1.35 volts. The overclock test, I just kind of threw a basic overclock that I knew that would take. 4 gigahertz, 1.4 volts. 1.5 or 1.15 on the SoC. Memory again 3000 megahertz, 1.35 volts. It's important to note that the CPU pulled as much as 144 watts in the overclock test. So let's take a look at, we'll do Intel burn test first, then we'll do Cinebench, and then we'll do IDA64 last. Now it's important to note that we are testing basically the AIO with the stock fan, the Deep Cool RF120, and the PC cooler fans, which I like a lot. And the orange is the adjusted overclock temperature for the Intel burn test. So that's the peak temperature based off of 20 degrees ambient. And the red is going to be at stock. And as you can see, the stock fan did fine, 57.6 degrees at 20 degrees ambient stock, and at 4 gigahertz, 73.6 on Intel burn test. So relatively impressive. The Deep Cool fan actually did a little bit better at stock, but at overclocked, they actually performed almost dead even at 55 degrees, so like 2 degrees lower, but not really a big difference. And the PC cooler fan, being a static pressure based fan, did perform the best when it comes to both, but overclock was margin of error, and at stock it was about 2.5, 2 3/4 lower. But overall they all performed very well, especially in overclock. Let's take a look at Cinebench. So how my Cinebench runs work is I run 3 tests and average them together. Unfortunately, this chart is extremely boring. Overclocked, they were within 0.3 degrees when adjusted at 20 degrees ambient. At stock, I mean, the PC cooler fans won by 1 degree. You can almost say that it's not margin of error because this is an average of 3 runs, but man, with the way the liquid coolers work, they're all really, really, really close. So there might be some other factors involved here that the fans aren't really going to make a big difference in this regard. So we're getting a pretty good conclusion so far. It looks like the stock configuration looks to be fine, but there's one more, and that's a little bit more of a realistic scenario, and that's the IDA64 test with everything except the hard drives Mac. So let's take a look at the different tests I did. So the yellow is the adjusted GPU load, which is the XFX 580, and then the red is the adjusted peak CPU, and then the orange is the adjusted sustained. With liquid coolers, the peak and the sustained is going to have some separation versus an air cooler. That's just the normal. But basically, the too long didn't read is, yes, the PC cooler fan did win. I don't think we were really surprised, but by about 2.5 degrees across the board, at least, well, only on the adjusted CPU and adjusted GPU. The sustained, it didn't really win out by much. But basically, this kind of concluded what I previously said, which is if you're just buying this in the stock configuration, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's a really good mid-range cooler for 50 bucks, and it'll have pretty good case compatibility since it's only 120. So that's pretty much that. Let's go ahead and give you my final thoughts. So let's talk about the too long didn't read. So let's just say you skip to the end. What's the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is this fan actually it's fine. A little bit behind the PC cooler fan, but that's bred to be static pressure. This does have a bit more static pressure than I realized. I mean, the blades are definitely more open, but they have some curve to it. So I'm not an expert on fan design. I made the assumption that this fan was going to do really bad, and it turns out it didn't. It did fine. I'm actually not using this fan. I'm not using the PC cooler fan. I'm using the Deep Cool fan, and the reality of it is they all perform pretty close to each other. Neither one of them thermal throttled or got anything outside the spec that I ran it at, which was, you know, Intel burn test, overclocked. I mean, this system's going to be mildly OC'd. You know, it's not going to be run through full GPU, CPU loads, and even if it was, I mean, we were talking, what, in the 70 degree range, so it's well within spec. So overall, I'm actually pretty satisfied with the performance of this cooler. So to give you an idea, we were pushing about 130 to 140 watts, and you know, technically I did exceed 80 degrees on some tests, but it had to do with the fact that the temperature in the room was like 26, 27 degrees Celsius, so it's quite warm in here. So when it adjusted down to a normal room temperature of like 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius, it performed really well. And as you see, I did some tests with the GPU load as well, because that's realistic. That's what you can expect. So that's pretty much it. I recommend this cooler. I don't know much about the longevity. I don't really know if this is a new model or not, to be 100% honest. So I feel like it could be. I'm not sure. Do more research on it, but link in the description below, $50. It's fine with this. I'm using the RF120 because that's what I have in here, and I have everything's set up for it, so it would just be, it wouldn't sync right if I did like a completely separate fan. So if you like the video, hit the like button, dislike, leave a comment, get subscribed, buy this in the description. But as always, guys, this is Steve from PC Budget Solutions, and I'll see y'all later on down the road.